Hey, remember in 2008 when the Democratic National Committee released a Christmas message that implicitly compared newly elected President Barack Obama to Jesus? It went a little something like this. Merry Christmas to all. Over 2 millennia ago, a new hope was born into the world, a Savior who would offer the promise of salvation to all mankind. Just as the 3 wise men did on that night, this Christmas heralds a time to celebrate the good news of a new king. Okay, if you don't remember the Democratic National Committee releasing that Christmas message 8 years ago, it's probably because that quote was actually from this year's Christmas message, which was released by the Republican National Committee. Think back on the last 8 years of right-wing alarmism and phony outrage in response to President Obama, and just try to imagine how the Republicans would have responded if the Democrats had released a Christmas message referencing the birth of Christ and then declaring that Christmas, a mere 6 weeks or so after the election, a time to celebrate the good news of a new king. And yet, when the Republicans released that message in the wake of Donald Trump's election, and some of us raise an eyebrow, what's the response? Sean Spicer, Trump's incoming press secretary, told BuzzFeed's David Mack, quote, "I hope you are kidding. Christ is the king in the Christian faith. To ask this on Christmas is frankly offensive." You know how some folks have labeled Trump the gaslighter-in-chief? This is exactly the sort of thing that they're talking about. Gaslighting is a form of psychological abuse where the abuser seeks to undermine the victim's confidence in their own perception of reality. In this case, the abusers are Trump and his campaign/incoming administration, and the victims are all of us. The RNC releases a Christmas message following a presidential election won by their candidate, a candidate with a well-documented and ongoing history of megalomaniacal self-regard, a message that includes a reference to the birth of Christ, followed immediately by a description of this Christmas as a time to welcome the good news of a new king. Many of us read this message and infer that the new king being referred to is Trump. After all, Christ may be the king of the Christian faith, but he's been king for over 2,000 years. Or since the very beginning of the universe, depending on how you interpret the Christian scriptures and define Christ and his role, which would hardly make him a new king. And the United States doesn't have a king, but we do have a president, and we just elected a new one. The response from Trump's press secretary was not to acknowledge some ambiguity in the language of the message, not to say, well, the message might allow for that inference, but that certainly was not the intention, but rather to ridicule and express personal offense at the very suggestion. How dare we even think such a thing? Why would any reasonable person possibly infer such a comparison? It's not as if such a thing would be completely in character for a Republican Party that has consistently rolled over for Trump and his egomania, not to mention his bigotry and compulsive lying for over a year. Here's the point. Is that RNC Christmas message definitely, without a doubt, a Trump is Christ comparison? No. And if you read it and didn't come away with that interpretation, that is absolutely fine with me. But the Trump as Christ comparison is not an unreasonable thing to infer, given the language of the message, this Christmas, the good news of a new king, the context, a Republican statement released 6 weeks after the election of a new Republican president, the fact that, as noted by CNN, last year's RNC Christmas message also referred to Christ but made no reference to a king, much less to a new king, and the well-established character of Trump and his campaign/incoming administration. When Trump's press secretary dismisses the inference as ridiculous and feigns outrage, ignoring or denying the factors that led many of us to consider it reasonable, he's doing the exact same thing that Trump and his surrogates have done from the very beginning whenever they are caught in a lie or confronted with something uncomfortable, playing victim and placing 100% of the blame on us and our supposedly delusional perception of the events in question. In other words, he's gaslighting us. Pay attention and don't just let it pass. By the way, even if you dismiss the suggestion that it contains a comparison of Trump to Christ, this year's Christmas message from the RNC is disgusting. In the second paragraph, the message asks us to remember the less fortunate and says, "It is our prayer we will rise to meet the material, emotional, and spiritual needs of individuals all around us." This from the party that seeks to repeal the Affordable Care Act, gut Medicare and Medicaid, and implement economic policies that will crush the working class and the poor. We've seen what Republican concern for the less fortunate looks like when it comes time to make law and govern. It's about as genuine as humility from our president-elect.